Hello everyone. We are live in Singapore with DNV, the world's leading classification society and a recognized advisor for the maritime industry. Welcome to the first episode of our Live from Singapore webinar series, where we discuss the most pressing safety, technology, and regulatory topics in shipping across Southeast Asia. I'm Yvonne Chan, and I'll be your host and moderator. This episode brings together industry experts to talk about the opportunities and the impact of global transformation on the maritime industry. While it's clear that shipping is moving towards carbon zero, how we get there is still fraught with challenges. There are many different pathways to decarbonize, with alternative fuels, different technologies, and varying energy efficiencies for existing vessels. So we'll hear from two perspectives today: owners and charterers, on the strategies that they've adopted and the challenges faced by their organization. We'll also touch on safety. A solid safety foundation is essential for alternative fuel technologies and innovation to take off. And that's where DNV comes in. It has an important role to play, working with various stakeholders along the maritime value chain to ensure synergy, efficiency, and clarity. Now, before we begin our discussion, just a quick housekeeping tip on how you can participate in our webinar today. You can submit questions to our speakers at any time by clicking on the question mark icon in the control panel, and we'll take as many relevant questions as we can. Now, let me introduce our speakers for our discussion today. To my left, we have Mr. Rashpal Singh Bhatti, the Vice President of Maritime and Supply Chain Excellence at BHP, one of the world's largest bulk charterers. BHP has heeded the Global Maritime Forum's call to decarbonize all of shipping by 2050, and is also a founding member of the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization. Welcome, Rashpal.
Thank you. Great to be here, Yvonne.
Likewise. Good to have you with us today. And to Rashpal's left, we have Ms. Cristina Sayens de Santa Maria. She is the Regional Manager at DNV, responsible for maritime operations in Southeast Asia, India, and the Pacific. As the pressures to decarbonize accelerates, DNV has gathered the most up-to-date information to help the industry navigate complex challenges. Welcome, Cristina.
Thanks, Yvonne.
And rounding up our panel today, we have Mr. Johan Munir, the Global Director of Corporate Strategy and Planning at AET. AET is the leading owner and operator of maritime transportation assets and specialized services. They've also pioneered the dual-fuel Aframax, the VLCC, and DP shuttle tankers, setting a new standard for eco-efficient shipping to meet the IMO's 2030 aspirations and beyond. Once again, a very warm welcome to all my speakers today. I'd like to kick off our discussion by first getting your views on the perceptions of shipping. Now, shipping forms the backbone of international trade, but despite transporting about 80% of world trade, shipping still makes headlines for being one of the biggest contributors to global greenhouse gas emissions. So how do you think, as an industry, we're able to challenge the negative perception of shipping as a polluter and a decarbonization laggard? I'd like you to start the ball rolling first, Rashpal.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. First of all, shipping is the backbone of trade around the world. I think nobody disputes that, as you just said. Let's put some numbers to this.
Okay.
So shipping emits approximately 900 billion, let's say 1 billion tons of carbon, which is a huge number. Relatively speaking, that's 2% of the world's emissions. So I think we've got to be very clear about that. And then when you put that on a unit basis of 90%, 80 to 90% of the world's trade is moved by shipping, then from a unit perspective, there is no more efficient way of making the economy run. And I think we've got to be very, very clear about that. Point number two then is that it was only in 2019 that the IMO first put forward its first set of requirements from an emissions perspective, and that was IMO 2020 from a sulfur perspective. The next lot is CII, and then it's only going to be in 2023 when we see something more stringent. So let's be very clear. We're right at the start of this journey, and at the start of this journey, the energy levels of all the participants is very, very high, and I hope that continues, and I think it will continue because this is an existential issue. And given the participation we have here today, we feel very strongly that the shipping industry will decarbonize, And we'll give some examples about exactly how that works, I'm sure, a bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great that you put into perspective as well as to what kind of volumes we're looking at in terms of comparison of what kind of trade is being transported and the amount of emissions that we actually put out as the industry. So 2% global greenhouse gas emissions. Thanks, Rashpal. Christina, your thoughts?
Yes, no, I think it's quite a new phenomenon, right, that we're making the mainstream media as a polluter. I think that, in my opinion, would have been a timelier statement some years back, but there has been a lot of development from the regulatory side, environmental technology, and new fuels. So I think we need to speak up. We need to share what we are doing, and of course, the more concrete we can be, the better. Having said that, of course, even though we have a clear goal and strategy to go to carbon zero, the road to get there still to be defined, right? So I think we also need to be aware that we need to really improve the uptake of new fuels that have the green tag, and work on the energy supply and availability, infrastructure, understanding of the technical maturity, and also deal with the prices. And of course we need to collaborate both within the maritime ecosystem and also cross-sector. But we're getting there.
Seems like there's a lot of things we got to do, Christina. We're going to go into each little one in just a little bit, but thank you for that. Johan.
Yes, Yvonne. I guess the fact is this, right? The negative perception is there, right? Until and unless we do something, right? And for us, for AET, we feel that we need to increase the industry collaboration, right? Create the right ecosystem, right? Now, if we look at our own journey, we first started doing our dual fuel back in 2017, and it was not an easy decision. It was a thought-through decision, right? But it was quiet in terms of decarb at that point in time, right? But if you fast forward 2019, the last 2 years, there's a lot more discussion, right? And we would like to see that momentum going, right? Because it is a must, right? A lot of things are being transported by us, and we need to do the right thing as a shipping community.
Yeah, we've got to do the right thing. I want to then ask you to, where exactly are we in the decarbonization journey? We said it's very long, it's a marathon, up to 2050. You earlier alluded to, Rashpal, that we are perhaps all at the same starting line, but I want to ask you now, if I could ask you to give me a figure, a percentage, 1 to 100%, where exactly are we? Give me a figure and tell me why you think we're just at that number.
Yvonne, we're at the start of the race.
Not 1%, no.
Maybe not.
We've made some baby steps in the last 2 years.
We made some really good steps.
Yeah.
Right? I think we should be positive about those. I think the momentum is very good. I think that the global awareness of what needs to be done is very good. I think the drivers are very important here. The drivers being, most people talk about this from the perspective of stakeholder pressure, shareholder pressure. I think it's more than that. I think it's an existential problem, and people within organizations understand it as our purpose to leave the planet in a better place than where we found it. That purpose is a shared purpose amongst employees. Now let's come back to some numbers again.
Yes.
If we take LNG, and BHP is, like Johan said, they've done this in the tanker space. BHP is the organization that has led the way in creating LNG-fueled Newcastle Max's 209,000 ton vessels. I'm very pleased to say the first one arrives in Singapore on the 7th of February, and DNV has been a partner with us to make this happen. So thank you, Christina.
And just after Chinese New Year as well.
Absolutely, very auspicious.
Exactly, yes.
Very auspicious. Yet, only 30% of the order book today is LNG. Now, isn't that quite telling? We know we have a fuel that delivers a 30 to 40% abatement. We know that from a cost perspective, we can match or beat VLSFO, yet VLSFO vessels are still being ordered. So that tells you that from a mindset point of view, there are those people that are waiting for the silver bullet. Our view is that you don't look past good to wait for perfection. And LNG is a good solution that's here today. And 30 to 40% is not a number that you can look past. So I don't think we should be lethargic. I don't think we should be complacent. And I think we have to take the bull by the horns and understand we're moving from a homogeneous world to a heterogeneous world. None of us here know what that solution is going to look like. We're going to have to expand our views before we converge them. But we must all expand our views first, take a very broad view to decarbonization before we start converging back.
And you said we don't look past good. So you guys have the first of 5, right? LNG,
That's right.
fuel maxed, a Newcastle max bulk carriers coming in. But you're also saying you are not, you are open to the idea of then also perhaps ordering other alternatively fueled vessels if it allows for more abatement at a lower cost at a particular point in time.
Absolutely. I see, Yvonne, very clearly that on our roadmap, we will have LNG vessels. We will probably have some kind of biofuel vessel too. We probably will be looking at vessels that where we trial ammonia, where we trial perhaps even hydrogen. We don't know, but we have to get through those. And as you know, the GCMD, the Global Centre for Maritime Decarbonization, of which DNV and BHP are founding members,
yeah.
we have announced very recently that we'll be doing an ammonia bunkering trial from a safety perspective here in Singapore very soon.
Fantastic. I like this openness to try, like you said,
Absolutely.
expand the horizons and then converge after you've done your trials and all that. Thank you, Rashpal. Christina, where are we on the decarbonization journey? And if you have a number to give me, you know I love numbers.
Yes, I will give some numbers. Basically, I mean, shipping industry is very fragmented. So I think you can see some shipping owners that are ahead of the game, whereas others are actually trying to find where they fit in the whole decarbonization puzzle. But we are making progress, as Rashpal said. So back in 2019, actually only 6% of all the new building orders were with alternative fuels. 2020 we jumped to 12%. Now even higher. So hopefully we are growing and the growth is exponential and not linear, and we will get there. But what I can also say is that certainly DNV is 100% committed to help all ship owners and stakeholders along the whole decarbonization journey.
Thank you, Christina. Johan, let's have your views on this one.
Well, I was waiting for the numbers.
Yeah, I let them off, but I shouldn't let you off.
Okay.
Oh, you will give me that number.
Let me try the number.
Thank you.
So basically, because our journey started earlier, 2017, I think we are cautiously optimistic, right? As I say, compared to, let's say, even 3 or 4 years ago, nobody speaks about decarb in the shipping industry, right? Whereas the rest of the world were talking about it since, I don't know, at least COP, in Paris, right? If I look at number, I think we might be about 25 to 30%.
That's not too bad.
Not too bad,
Yeah.
but if
Wow.
you're at school, you still fail, right? You need to go for your tuition,
Actually,
do
yes.
a bit more, right?
If you're at school, that is a bad result.
So what I'm trying to say here is the momentum is there, right? So as an ecosystem, whether DNV, BHP, or us as a ship owner, we just need to make sure that the momentum does go forward rather than just stay as it is. The challenge is always going to be there,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, 25 to 30.
I like that you gave me a number, and when you did that, Rashpal went, wow. Do you think that's too optimistic? Where do you think we are then?
No, I love the optimism. I love the fact that Johan thinks that it's 25 to 30%. I can't give you a number because I'm otherwise I'd be giving you something that I'm going to pluck out the air, which I'm not going to do. But what I will say is, if I take the 30% LNG number, that's empirical
Telling as well,
evidence,
yes.
right? That's quite telling,
Yeah.
and that reconciles with what you said. The other thing that I often think about is how much carbon have we abated? To me, that's important. So of that billion tons of carbon, how much have we abated today? There are pledges, there are perhaps new bills on the way, there are perhaps discussions, but what have we abated? And that number is a very, very small single-digit number.
I hear you on that one. Let's talk a little bit more about abatement numbers. Also, a lot of food for thought there. I wanted to talk about the role of regulations because let's face it, the maritime industry is operating in a very challenging environment right now, right? But besides the emissions targets that were set by the IMO, we're also seeing increasing regional emissions targets being implemented by the EU, etc. So what sort of measures have your organizations at BHP and AET implemented to try to stay on top of these changing regulations, Johan?
Yeah, I mean, we've operate a global fleet, right? The way that we do it is always to be in touch, right? I mean, we work with the regulators, flag state, we work with the shipyards or classification societies, and as well as our customers, because the regulation will continue to change, right? But at a certain point, you as an owner or you as a customer, we need to make a decision, right? What's your choice, right? So my message is, the discussion, the engagement that we have, like today, right? New ideas will come up, right? But to do nothing is just wrong.
But it's hard to always try to fit what your company is doing with the latest regulations that are coming out, right? I mean, I want to know, is it regulations come first and then the industry follows, or the industry together make changes and then you kind of fit the regulations in there, Rashpal?
I have a very strong view on this, which is that we're heading into a time where innovation will drive regulation. Regulation will not drive outcomes. And the reason I say that is that whilst we have the utmost respect for the IMO, we are still far too far behind on our speed to market. CII, EEXI are good, but they don't take us to where we need to be. And because the IMO has so many jurisdictions that it needs to look after, I understand that it's quite a protracted approach. So, given that then, the organizations in the world that have influence, that have scale, that have presence, need to take positions. And that's why BHP is the largest bulk charterer in the world, feels very strongly that we need to do this not just because of our own business, but we need to do this for the industry and we need to do it for the globe. So to answer your question specifically, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So we move 350 million tons of product a year. And we have about 150 vessels on the water at any point in time. So it's not just that number that's important, it's the fact that BHP, because of who we are and what we do, has an impact, a reverberation on the rest of the market, and we're very mindful of that and grateful. So with that then, there's three things. First of all, the zero carbon fuel of the future. Secondly, innovation, these are all pillars. And then thirdly, chartering choices. Zero maritime fuel of the future, well, you know what we're doing there, LNG, and we just talked about, we'll go through the phases.
That's right.
And we'll
Trials.
expand and then convert.
Right.
Innovation is very important. So those changes that are going to help us with 5, 7, 8% abatement are also very important, whilst we don't get to the silver bullet. So those are what? Those are rotors, wind rotors on vessels. And we will very soon have wind rotors on our vessels traveling east to west across the globe.
Nice.
Which is fantastic. The second thing is hull painting. Less friction on the vessel. That is something we're working towards and getting close to that. Drop-in fuels. We can have biofuels, old cooking oil, which gets us to 70-80% abatement. These are drop-in fuels, so we can use that at any point in time. So that innovation work is something that's happening here and now, not in the future, and is not dependent on anything.
Right.
We can make that happen today.
Yeah.
The third one is chartering choices. Now I want to talk about this a little bit, because we don't have to wait for anybody else from a chartering choice perspective, right? So people think that from an abatement perspective, the only lever that we have is to slow down vessels. No, that's not true. The choices that we have is how we influence our vessel owners, how we influence our head owners, how we implement veracity, for example, from DNV, to get the best data to understand from a sensor point of view, what is that vessel actually delivering to me from a fuels perspective? And then bring that back to your chartering team and say, I am now incentivizing you on making sure that not only the safest vessel comes into our supply chain, not only the lowest cost vessel comes into the supply chain, but the highest abating vessel comes into our supply chain, and then reward that behavior and reward the people in that ecosystem to make it happen. That's something we've started already, and we're seeing great outcomes.
And those were independent of regulations as
Independent
well. And this pillars that you mentioned, they're kind of like a multi-pronged approach.
That's
Is that part of the BHP Climate Transition Action Plan?
It is. That's the CTAP. You got it. Obviously, you read that already.
I did my homework. I had to know who I was speaking to today. Let's carry on then. Still talking about regulations. A very interesting point of view there, Rajpal, of how BHP is, trialing and also doing things independently, given your position and influence in the industry. And that is, but I mean, the maritime industry still has to deal with regulations that are coming from the top. Do you see them as a burden or an opportunity? And if so, what kind of roadblocks need to be overcome? Christina, I'd like you to take this one first.
Yeah, so, well, I think we will need, it's still to be seen whether it will be, we will incentivize and we will reward the first movers. Hopefully we do that, because regulatory certainty, it's a must. I mean, we need to allow the ship owners to instigate their long-term strategies. We need to give them some leeway, because actually if we give leeways to the first movers, we're going to get further towards our decarbonization, our common decarbonization goal. So hopefully that regulatory certainty will come soon. Another roadblock that I see is certainly that we are talking about the cross-sector and the global shipping industry. That's not an easy task. We need a lot of public and private investment. We need as well a lot of large-scale testing to really make sure that the new fuels that we are putting on the market are actually safe. It's also extremely important that the regulations actually approach that safety aspect. And and I think our role as DNV is to be a trailblazer for the regulators to make sure that we have the standards and the guidelines in place so that new adoptions of fuels and technologies are safe.
Just to make everything a lot clearer for everyone, all the players in the maritime sector, isn't it, Christina?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Johan, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, if I can add. I mean, to us, because we carry oil and gas, right? So regulation is important to us. It's not a burden, because this is something that we need to do, and we need to do it in the safety envelope, right? And there's always a solution. But if there is a roadblock, right? I think roadblock is our mental mindset and our fear, right? Our fear as ship owners, right? Because in the end, maybe this uncertainty is creating the let's wait for the perfect solution.
It's like an inertia to change.
Yeah, and I think that's wrong, right? Rajpal was saying just now, like just a few numbers of dry bulk owners are moving into LNG, right? I do believe that everybody has a choice, but the choice must not be let's wait, right?
Yeah.
And especially over the last couple of years in the pandemic, some owners are having windfall profits, right? So, other than putting it back to the shareholders, maybe the right thing to do right now is to invest in technology, right? So yeah, that's my thought on this.
Speaking of technology, hold that thought for later. I want to dig deep just a little bit, but we often hear this: there's no better time to act than now. I think that particular sentence is especially pertinent to shipping, where the pressures to decarbonize are accelerating, and we also have an existential challenge ahead of us. Rajpal, you shook your head when I said just now, do you think regulations are a burden? So I'm guessing you see them as an opportunity, and if so, where are the tangible benefits or advantages of being a first mover in the industry?
Great question, Yvonne. So first of all, why do I think that regulation is an opportunity? Regulation is an opportunity because it creates a common denominator, a common platform for people to work towards, and you don't get the issue of some people are rewarded and some people are not. You get convergence towards a goal. And that's why I say that the IMO needs to really accelerate its process. I don't think 2023 is soon enough. I think that needs to happen a lot sooner. So that's point point number. What was your second?
The first one, tangible benefits of being a first mover.
Yeah, so the tangible benefits of being a first mover. A couple of things. The first is that you have the impact on the industry. So when we did the LNG vessels, within 3 months, the majority of our peers in the mining industry did the same thing.
They want it in.
Absolutely. And we see that as a compliment, of
Yes.
course, but we also see that as, if that hadn't happened, we would have been very upset. Because we're not doing this just for ourselves. As I said earlier, we're doing this for the ecosystem. We're doing this for the industry. The second advantage to this is that we will now have LNG fuel Newcastle Maxes on our books for 2 years prior to any of our competition. And when we talk to the steel mills, who are our customers, and we say to them, hey, look, we've got a product that we can deliver that you can't buy at the moment because there are no other solutions available and our peers don't have, they're very excited. Because of course they have a Scope 3 issue themselves. And what this does is it creates momentum in the market to say... For change. And to say, oh, you're able to help us with our Scope 3 without them lifting a finger. We're able to help them with their solution. We can't double count that, of course, but it is creating a sense of optimism, a sense of action today that we weren't able to do previously.
I like that, creating a sense of action today, because we keep saying we need to do more, but it's not about waiting till we find the perfect solution or waiting till we're almost at 2030 and then we start to panic. There's some things that we could do in 2022.
Exactly.
Johan, you want to add some thoughts to this? Tangible benefits.
Yeah, sure. I guess the few points that I would like to add is it creates engagement, right? Because when you're trying to do something new, right, and there'll be naysayers, right? When we first started it, even some of our, the banks that we approach says that, no, you can only value these vessels at the market value, excluding the LNG, right? But things have changed, right? So it creates engagement, it creates knowledge. And I think one of the other things when it comes to engagement is, if you look at layers, it's not only at the staff, the management, but also our board members, right? And for us to be able to spend half of what we spend about 2 billion since 2016, and 50% of it is LNG, right? I think it was a big ask from our board, right? And the good thing is our board are pretty progressive, right? And they are looking at what can we do in terms of sustainability, in terms of ESG, right? So I think it's good for what we intend to do. It's good for our company, and it's also good for our brand.
Can I just ask Johan a question?
Sure.
There? So Johan, that's a really interesting point that, of course, it was a big decision for the board, and kudos to them, at a time when there wasn't so much momentum around this.
Yeah.
Now when they look back on this, or when you as the executive team and the board look back on this, how excited are they about the decision that they made?
I think it's always when there's something new, it's always a mixed feeling, right?
Yeah.
Because
Will it work or not?
Will it work or not? And at that point in time, our first two Aframax LNG vessel, which is Eagle Bintulu and Eagle Brasilia, right? Eagle Brisbane. There was no time charter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's always good to have all the stars aligned, and it's always easier to go to the board with all the stars aligned. But some stars are not there, right? But there are enough momentum push in the company and enough support from the board to go ahead.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. That's a great point, right?
Yeah.
You've got to color in some part of the page as you go along.
Exactly.
Actually, I really like that analogy, coloring a little bit, and as more people jump on board, you get a much more beautiful portrait.
Absolutely. But just to pitch in, on the acting
Of course,
now.
yes.
Because, we need to realize that this is the decade. And we are already in 2022. And this decade, we will really define whether we make it or not. So we need to start doing things now and taking actions, as Rajpal said. That is not dependent on regulations, but us as companies that we can take and then take certain risks, as Johan mentioned, right, towards the board. Not even when all the stars are aligned.
Yeah.
So if we
Yet.
were to look at the fleet that we have today, the existing fleet, are we in a two-tier charter market already? Because like Rajpal alluded to also earlier, by 2023, the EEXI and the CII are coming into play. So would higher polluting ships then risk earning lower charter rates? Looking directly at you there.
Thanks, Yvonne. Look, I think the first thing to say is that pre-decarbonization, even when we were in a homogeneous market, the two-tier, three-tier, multi-tier market exists. Of course it exists. Why does it exist? Because certain vessels perform better than others. And because we are in a commoditized market, those vessels will then command a premium over the standard vessel. And then there'll be other vessels that don't meet the standard spec and they will demand a discount. So that existed already coming into this market. What we will see now is that will be exacerbated. But it will be exacerbated to the point where I think that because charterers will have to do the right thing, which is only bring those vessels into their book, which are going to deliver the safest outcome, the lowest cost outcome, and an abated outcome, that there will be those vessels or those sets of vessels in a fleet that because they haven't moved along the journey, because that they've sat still, they will find themselves crowded out of the market.
So those are one of the key risks then, besides the lower charter rates.
You know what we say nowadays, right, in most industries is that you got to remain relevant. Shipping is no different. Ship owners, charterers, technical managers have to remain relevant. Otherwise, they will not be part of the game.
Shape up or, don't mind me, ship out. I just had to do it there because we're talking about the shipping industry. Yes. You got it. I mean, I'm sure the audience appreciated that quip from me. Johan, you think we're in a two-tier?
I do agree with what Rajpal said. I mean, as an owner as well as charterer, right? I mean, to us, the ships are our babies, right? And we need to know the ships, each of them, right? There's some characteristics for each of them, right? So there are some price differentiation today, right? But having said that, right, for this market to really develop, right, I think the price, the tiering of the price, with with companies that are really investing and the companies are who are just thinking, it's not there yet, right? I think we need to encourage more investment, right?
And just to stay relevant as well. And it's also about the changing mindsets, like what you shared about your board. I think that's very encouraging when you have people at the top who are willing to try, and then you see these very positive results trickle in. It does set the momentum, the chain for a lot of other things to follow. I want to steer the conversation now back to the title of our webinar today, and that is future proofing. So let's talk about new buildings, right? We've got changing transportation needs, new fuel technologies, other technological progress, as well as uncertain regulations, which DNV is coming in to make that a lot more clear for the industry. No pressure there, Christina.
No problem.
So it looks like the ship of the future, man, it has got to be pretty flexible and agile to remain competitive. And that also really depends on, like you said just now, Rajpal, the type of technologies that we adopt today. So what strategies are you taking to future-proof your fleets? Rajpal.
Thanks, Yvonne. So a couple of things there. The first is that we find ourselves in a really fortunate position where, given our scale and influence, we can ask for certain things to happen. So let me just talk about that a little bit. So when we were looking for the LNG fueled Newcastle Maxes, we went to the ecosystem, right? We tendered this position and went out to more than 30, 35 organizations. That dwindled down, and eventually we settled with Eastern Pacific Shipping, Shell, and SWS as the shipyard. And through that process, we were able to say, for these vessels to come to BHP, we want the tank size to be X. We want the tank to perform like this. We want the engine to perform like this. All of the things that we could think through, and DNV was or is our partner for that, to say that what will we require 10 years hence? And we were able to bring those innovations and technologies into into those vessels. Now, not everybody is in that position. Isn't as fortunate as us to be in that position. And the challenge, Yvonne, is that vessels generally have a lifespan of 20 to 25 years. Generally, in the past almost 100 years, vessels have required one type of fuel. The design hasn't changed that much. And when you go to the bank and ask for financing, they know what they're going to get. Today, when a vessel owner goes to a bank and says, hey, I'm going to build a vessel, whether that vessel is going to become redundant in the next 5 years, 10 years or 15 years is not known. Now, do I have an answer for you to say, how do you, as a vessel owner, future-proof your fleet for the next 25 years? I wouldn't want to be in that position. I want to be in a position where I have optionality for every 5-year block in the next 15 to 20 years.
So bite-sized rather than just a full direct.
With optionality. Optionality is very important. Dual fuel is very important. The optionality, so the vessels that we've taken on, we can also retrofit them to ammonia. So that was one of the things that we talked to DNV about. What would it cost us now to make sure that in 6, 7, 8 years, we could retrofit them to ammonia? So we did that.
That actually makes a lot more sense, both financially and economically.
Yeah.
Johan, what are you doing on the AET's front?
Well, I guess the reality is this, right? It's very uncertain, right? And in my position as I was previously the CFO of AET, right? And I face my shareholder in terms of,
So you're always dealing with the numbers.
I always deal with numbers, right? And it's always about, what is your certainty of income, your return, right? And here, we have to make a decision for an asset that will be there for the next 20 years, if not 25 years, right? So it's a difficult, uncertain area today. But having said that, for us, there are I would say about 4 or 5 guiding lights. I mean, we do have a sustainability strategy in AET. And, while E, S, and G is important, equally important is also the F, something new, financials, right? So we need to look at not only, but having said that, we need to look at not only the profit, but also the people on the planet. That's the first one. The second one to future-proof is, because this is a ever-changing environment.
Yes, tough environment.
Engagement, right? Engage. You will find new ideas. What you have today, you feel is good, but in 2 years' time, there might be something better, right? And in our discovery, and other than investing in assets, we have about 9 assets today, LNG dual fuel, right, that we own, and we also in Charter 2. But we also engaged in or invested recently last October, November in a startup, right? Now, as a shipping company, we don't do R&D. We rely on people, right? But because this is so important, we decided that, okay, let's invest in a startup. And the startup is looking at methane abatement technologies, right? So those are things that we do, right? The third one is again, is an realization and openness that, LNG might not be the only way.
Yeah.
There might be other ways. Our shareholder, MIC Berhad, is a member of the Castor initiative that looks into ammonia. I mean, some of the members are like MPA, Jurong Port, Samsung, right? And when the time is right, definitely, we are going to invest, right? And also, I mean, when it comes to LNG, right? Today we're talking about LNG from fossil fuel, but there are enough technology today that's developing that LNG might be into bio LNG or even green LNG, right? But last but not least, as a finance person, right? It's all about risk management, right? Because things are changing, you need to really look at how do you factor in the risk. Because for us, something that we do, we're going to own it for the next 20 years.
So ESG with an F plus engagement and risk management for AET. Thanks, Johan. Christina, can I invite you to tell us how DNV is helping your clients to future-proof their fleets?
Yeah, well, certainly after the IMO decarbonization goals, we are looking at new energy sources, right? And there's two ways to look at it. It's first to use less energy to operate ships, because actually the cleanest energy is no energy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first one. And then the second one is to reduce the carbon emissions from the energy generation. So if we go from the operational efficiency part, we are looking at, maybe reduction in speed, hull performance. I mean, Raspal was alluding to that, those type of measures with coating, right? Also port call logistics, weather routing. And there are many more of that. So those are important. We are also working with different stakeholders in terms of the ship designs, also exploring new materials and new technologies. So that's try to get it more efficient. And then of course from the reducing the carbon emissions, then we are creating the rules, the standards, not only for the new fuels like LNG, like ammonia, but also, as Raspal alluded, like the ready ones that we call. So it's basically LNG ready or ammonia ready, so that a charter ship owner or whoever orders this vessel can actually invest a little bit more now, but has the certainty that we'll have flexibility going forward. And that's a key point for us, which we think is part of the successful recipe. It is the flexibility, because things are going to evolve within the same type of fuel, being from brown, blue to green, but also with other fuels. So so those are our main parts.
That's a great point that Christina just made in terms of future-proofing and what happens with the vessel today. So what we found is, so this is akin to what you need to do when you have a burning platform or an existential issue. So taking waste out of the supply chain is so important.
Yes.
So vessels still wait outside ports, as we know. So getting that supply chain to work seamlessly and be just in time takes out so many days and weeks of a vessel using energy. And if we don't actually, those numbers aren't very well known, but my estimate is that if we did that as an industry and took away the waste and the variability, both land side and ocean side, that there is at least 15-20% there in terms of uplift.
So more that we can do then. Thanks for highlighting, shining the spotlight on this particular issue, taking out the waste in waiting time, right, for the industry.
Do you think it's 15-20? Do you think it could be more?
Yeah, easily,
yeah.
absolutely. There's, I think more and more companies are looking at, life cycle within themselves, and I think that if you do that cross-sector, it's even more that we can get from there. So
And how about safety then? Because safety is always a core component of successful shipping, and the latest Safety Maritime report by DNV and Lloyd's List Intelligence, we have seen improvements in safety in the last decade, but given all the exponential demands that are required for new buildings, how are you going to mitigate some of these new safety risks, and what are you doing to ensure that safety is not compromised for your fleets? Rashpal.
Yuan, this is the most important subject to most of us, I think, which is seafarers and safety. So first of all, we're very, very pleased that incident rates over the last 2 decades in the maritime industry have come down significantly. Very pleased about that. What we're not pleased about, of course, is that not every seafarer who steps on a vessel doesn't get to go back home to their families. And that's not good enough. Every seafarer that gets on a vessel must be able to go back home to their families. And I think this is a great place, of course, for us to say collectively that our huge thanks to all of those hundreds of thousands of seafarers around the world who have not only served the communities that they live in, the companies that they work for, but made sure that all of us have been able to go to shops and the shelves have been full most of the time. And that is only because of seafarers. At a time when essential workers around the world have had it so difficult, no one, I think, has had it more difficult than seafarers. And their safety and well-being is a priority. So with that said, A couple of things. One is that we have to take the opportunity of change through decarbonization to also step up in safety. They go hand in hand. We cannot deliver a solution that delivers great abatement but then loses traction on safety. And an example of that is LNG. LNG is an example where we have had to go through huge hurdles and get through a number of audits, a number of trials to understand that LNG and tanks, LNG in certain environments, LNG in different temperatures, ambient and non, give us the outcomes that we need. And if I then take that to the next level, which is ammonia, ammonia is going to be a good solution for the maritime industry. The reason why ammonia hasn't been adopted already is because we are not clear as a shipping industry that ammonia is going to be a safely bunkered fuel of choice for the industry. And because we're not going to do it, because we cannot afford to have people come into greater risk as a result of abatement.
That's why we're looking forward to the trials that you said it's going to be happening very, very soon.
And that's exactly, thank you, Yvonne. And that's why the trials are so important, that we get through those trials, understand from a study perspective what those mean, and get the confidence to the point where the infrastructure can be created, and with a standard that DNV will set and others will set, that will take us into the next decades.
Very well said. Thank you, Rashpal. Johan, how else, when it comes to safety, how do you ensure that your vessels are not compromised too?
Thank you.
New vessels.
Thank you. I mean, first and foremost, I would like to thank again Rashpal by raising awareness about the plight of the seafarers, because sometimes when you don't see them, you sort of ignore them, right?
Yes.
And that's important, right? Their well-being, right? For us, for AET, on the petroleum side, we have about 3,000 seafarers that man our ships. But as a group, together with our parent company that does the LNG tankers, I think it's about 5,000, right? So safety of asset and safety of people is important, right? But if I focus on the safety of people, because when you do new technologies, right, you need to equip them, right? And this is where the training, the learnings, whether it's in-house or with institutions like DNV, come into play, right? The other thing is a lot of things. I mean, people always think that ship owners, we are very traditional, pen and papers, right?
Same here.
Pen and papers. But as a group, as a company, we are also moving ahead.
Yes.
Our holding company, MIC Berhad, they have digital ventures in 3 companies that look into operations, that look into safety and efficiency, right? And we are looking at ways of implementing this, right? And some of our vessels have been piloted, right? So that provides another element that helps in terms of safety of people.
Absolutely. Thanks, Johan. Christina, can I have you chime in too from DNV's perspective on safety?
Yes, so we actually think and we are seeing an emerging safety gap with the new cyber threats, new technologies, and the new fuels. So this is certainly something that we need to focus on as an industry, and we need to do a new risk management approach, focusing more on the human and organization factors. Because, as Rashpal and Johan were saying, the well-being of our seafarers, it's so important. So I think we need to also try to adopt a culture of continuous improvement, and with the focus on the human and organizational dimensions, because we cannot have a trade-off between sustainability and safety. That's just a no-go.
It's a non-compromisable.
Absolutely, and there's so many things that we can gain in terms of becoming more sustainable, also more digital, but that means more new ways of working, and that means changes, and we cannot just assume that it's gonna be fine. So, and we, of course, in DNV, that's our reason for being here, to look for the safety. So we are focusing a lot of our work there and in the years to come.
Thank you, Christina. I want to take a quick question from our audience right now, and let me read it out for all of you. We talk about the uncertainty around how relevant a vessel may be in 10, 15 years, but what truth is there in the notion that dual fuel vessels will ultimately remain relevant as they will be the last to become irrelevant versus current older tonnage? Rashpal.
Yes, I feel quite strongly about this one. So this, I get asked this question a lot, especially from what I said earlier, right, about 5-year blocks. Two things. First of all, to answer the question directly, we don't. So why not? And then what's the impact of that? A couple of things here. One is that what the ultimate technology, design of vessel and fuel is going to be of the future, none of us know. So what becomes relevant and irrelevant is a question of what is that last component, and we don't know what that is. So the question is unanswerable today. But what I will say is that if you relate this, the analogy is to the passenger car market. That we have known that the passenger car market will decarbonize, and it started much earlier than shipping.
That's right.
And cars have a lifespan that's less than 25 years. Yet, today, only last week did electric cars take over diesel cars in terms of purchase volume in Europe. It's 2022.
Yes.
So today, do we say that those car makers that decided to build hybrid cars, that decided to put catalyst in cars, that decided to build diesel cars, even though they knew that we were going to move to electric cars, that those cars are not bought today? Of course they are. This is a cycle. It's a long cycle, and shipping is going to be an even larger cycle. For us to say today, we will not build a dual fuel vessel because it might be the last one standing, and then what will we do, is the wrong way to think about it. And we only have to look at other industries as very good examples of the life cycle and taking the opportunity when it arises.
And so would you still stick to your notion that when you look at the life cycle of a ship, 25 years, you should be looking at it per 5 years?
Well, look, as a vessel owner, and they need financing, they can't just look at it for 5 years. And I completely understand that. But what they can do is take a view that from what we do know, that we are going to have to make this vessel as future-proof as possible, which is what you were just saying, and give it the best chance of success for the longest lifespan that I know today, which is no different to any other form of transportation, whether it's a truck or a car or anything else. How is that any different to any manufacturing?
It's just that with ships, the life cycle of it is just so much longer. Yeah. Thank you, Rashpal. I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for that. We're going to take another quick question from the audience. What competencies would be required for personnel on board ships to achieve the objectives of decarbonization for ships? That's quite an interesting one. Johan, you want to take a stab at it?
I will try. I'm not a technical guy. Of course, I'm more than happy to connect the audience to my technical team, right? But having said that, I mean, from a very high level perspective is this, right? Because it's something new, right? And because we are dealing with volatile LNG or whatnot, right? Or even ammonia, right? So the first thing is awareness. The first thing is, the people on board the ship will be trained, right? And that's important because in the end, people matters, people's life matters, right? So training is important, awareness of how to handle the product, right? So let's say, for example, carrying ammonia or carrying LNG is nothing new. It is being carried, right? But today is how do you handle ammonia for an LNG from a product into a fuel, right? And there might be some skilling or reskilling there.
Thank you, Johan. I want to quickly shoot a question to Rashpal before we move to our closing questions for the webinar today, and that is about the role of charterers and financiers in the industry. We have seen more and more so charterers as well as ship finance institutions taking a much more active role with the Poseidon Principles when it comes to lending considerations as well as the sea cargo charter. Who exactly calls the shots here? Because they're changing demands, and expectations for what charterers should be doing and ship finance institutions. Tell us
Yvonne-
your thoughts.
Yvonne, I think Johan put it very eloquently right at the start of this. It's an ecosystem approach. Right? So no one organization is calling the shots. I think that what's really important here is that each part of the value chain needs to come together, as we did for LNG, as we did for the GCMD, and put forward what skill sets, what value we bring to the table, and then converge that value and create the solution on the back of it. We have shown that charterers have a significant role to play. Had we not come forward with the tender for Newcastle, I'm not saying it won't have happened ever, but it wouldn't have happened in the time frame that it did. And that brought together fuel suppliers, classification societies, vessel owners, shipyards, technologists, innovators, and all parts of the supply chain. And that model is being replicated again and again, and that will happen for ammonia, for hydrogen, and for many other. And therefore, the calling the shots part is that people need to pool in their value. To do that, you have to have the mindset of, if I'm going to put value on the table, I have to share value. Yeah. And the ecosystem approach demands that you're not in a win-lose situation.
Yeah.
Which is which is difficult for many organizations around the world, because we have come from a mindset of, I am part of this company, I report to this shareholding, I want a win-lose situation. No, those days, that time is gone. For these issues that we're dealing with today, these are win-win situations, perhaps first mover advantage. Yeah. But I often say that it's not just that. Of course, we're doing this from a business value perspective. But I always often say that this LNG dual fuel vessels for us has been fascinating. Why? Because it invites a shareholding that ordinarily would not have been attracted. A group of investors. Yeah. It also, and even more importantly perhaps, invites a group of, a set of capabilities in the market, younger employees, who wouldn't have looked at us and said, oh, you're just a mining company. But no, today they look at us very differently and say, you are leading decarbonization and I want to be part of you.
Absolutely. You're bringing in the value for a different generation, the younger generation, who your company purpose speaks to their own values, and that's really important to stay relevant in this age right now.
Very good.
Johan, your thoughts?
Yeah, if I can add to that, is my advice as an ex-CFO is to the ship owners, don't be afraid, right? Because when we first talked about Poseidon Principle in 2019, there was a lot of question. Is it really necessary? How does the banker know this? They are not technical people, right? So we have about 13 to 15 banks. So when we first started Poseidon Principle, there was only 2 or 3 banks, and these are European banks. But today, after 2 years, almost 2/3 of our lenders are signatories to Poseidon Principles, right? So my advice to the owners, do it, right? Be open for changes, right? And to latch on to what Rashpal mentioned just now, right? As a very archaic old industry, right? Doing these things attract talents, right? People want to bring changes, right? I mean, you have a younger generation who feels that, yes, right, we need to bring changes to the industry.
Absolutely. Christina, I see you nodding very emphatically.
Yeah,
you agree with the gentleman today.
Absolutely, I concur to everything they have said, but I think that just reflecting that Singapore is one of the places to do this, right? I mean, the maritime ecosystem, I mean, it attracts the talent, it attracts the investment, it attracts everyone in the value chain that needs to make a decision, to make it happen. And I mean, we did it with LNG, and I'm sure we can make it with other fuels to come. So I think, collaboration it's really key. And I think what Raspal said about, the win-win type of attitude and not win-lose.
Yes.
I think it's key if we really want to reach.
Yeah, staying relevant, getting a win-win, and collaborating. This has been reiterated a lot in the last 1 hour. And right now, I would like to ask each of you to tell me whether there is a particular market mindset about shipping, decarbonizing shipping, or an alternative fuel that you would like to challenge or change, or perhaps have a more encourage the industry to have a more in-depth discussion about? Let's start with you first, Johan.
Well, I guess the short answer to that is that, as I say, don't be afraid, no fear, right? And one of the key enabler to no fear is this. Sometimes it starts at the board, right? So as a shareholder, as a company, as a management, we also need to help our board members, right? Equip them better with not only the ESG, but the E element of the environment, the emission, because it is a tough subject, right? And once the board are comfortable, then we will see change, we will see investment.
So starting at the board, to enable them
Exactly.
to come along on this journey of change. Thank you, Johan. Rajpal?
Yvonne, the question often comes, right? Which is, you do this and that's good for decarbonization, but what about the business? What people forget is that this starts as a business opportunity. The value to the business and the bottom line is first and foremost. Everything else comes into place after that. So when people say to me that you can't do this just on your own or just from a decarb perspective and with business value, I say absolutely you can. And that's the way it's got to be. It's got to be business first, and you deliver the outcomes that you want together with that. They're not separate things. So don't be afraid. You can make it happen.
Be bold. Don't be afraid. Thank you, Rajpal. Christina?
Yes, I think it would be that there's not going to be a silver bullet. And please, let's not let the good be an enemy of the perfect, which has been said before. My second message would say that we are in a hurry. This is the decade where we need to, make big breakthroughs. And then the last one would be that decarbonization is a team sport, it's not a race. So let's make it all together to achieve those goals.
It is a team sport. That's so well said. So we start at the board, allowing them to be enablers. Business value and decarbonization, they go hand in hand.
Exactly.
And there is no silver bullet. We can do this together if we work as a team sport. So get rid of that win-lose mentality in the shipping industry. Wow, thank you so much, Rajpal, Christina, and Johan, for your wonderful insights today. With this changing business environment, many maritime companies have to not only adapt to stricter emissions regulations, they also have to cope with pressures from investors as well as the public. And the only way to reach those decarbonization goals, as my panelists have highlighted today, is truly to collaborate. That is the true fuel of the future, and it comes with zero emissions. And this also means working with the full maritime ecosystem in terms of the types of vessels that we choose to be chartered, the types of fuels that are used, the types of routes that are taken, and also having different players do more to influence the industry as a whole. Finding a suitable pathway to decarbonize has to be a priority, and that will be the key to sustained success for both owners and charterers. Thank you so much to one and all today. I really enjoyed that conversation. To our online audience, thank you so much for submitting your questions. If you would like to catch a replay of the conversation today, a recording of the webinar will be made available on demand. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for DNV's first live from Singapore webinar session. I do hope you've had some key takeaways. My name is Yvonne Chan. It's been a pleasure being your moderator, and I look forward to seeing you at our next conversation. Take care and have a great week ahead. Bye-bye.